So this is the Lenovo Legion Slim 7. Now, if you recall last year, we got the opportunity to check out the Slim 7i, which was, or as the name suggests, a slimmer version of the Legion 7i, which was one of the fastest laptops at the time. They're following the same trend this year, but instead of using Intel, they're actually embracing AMD's Ryzen platform and RTX 30 series from NVIDIA. Now, we've had this thing for about a week here in the studio, and we've run our usual suite of benchmarks, and the performance is actually really impressive considering how thin it is. So let's check this out a little bit more in depth, but first, a quick word from our sponsor.
Come on, it's easy. You just have to catch them. Man, my reflexes suck today. I need more speed, have no fear. 360 Hz is here with the awesome fast IPS panel that will make you get good. The PG259Q in our monitor comes with a regular stand, and this awesome ROG desk mounting kit to free up some real estate has built-in NVIDIA Reflex Latency Analyzer to give competitor gamers an accurate measurement of system latency. Wow. And of course, it's G-Sync equipped to minimize display stutter and input lag. Get the proper speed to catch all the frames. Check it out below.
Okay, so the first thing we need to discuss here is pricing and the different spec configurations that Lenovo offers. So it starts at $1,500 US, and for that you get a Ryzen 7 5800H with 16 gigs of RAM, half a terabyte of storage, and an RTX 3060 GPU, and a 15-inch 1080p 165Hz IPS display. This is what we're testing here, by the way. But you can actually get a Ryzen 9 CPU, twice the storage, and a 4K 60Hz screen that's brighter for about $200 more. But here's the thing. Pricing for Legion laptops is kind of all over the place. Some are on sale for a really long time, some just don't even make sense, like this one over here that I found on Best Buy that comes with a 3050 Ti GPU. I mean, that's just highway robbery. Not to mention, there are shipping delays with this laptop due to, obviously, the pandemic, so just keep an eye out for those things when you're shopping around. Now, you might be wondering, Eber, where does the Slim 7 stack up against the competition? Well, there is the ROG Zephyrus G14 and G15, the Razer Blade 14 and 15, MSI's GS66 Stealth can also be included, the Omen 16 from HP. I mean, the list just goes on, but there are a few things to consider. Lenovo does not actually offer a 3070 or 3080 GPU on the Slim 7, which means that you can't really compete or compare it with the ultra-thin, high-performance gaming laptops that cost more than $2,000. I think it's meant to compete with the baseline offerings that other OEM laptop manufacturers have, notably the 3060 models. With that out of the way, let's talk about the exterior design and build quality of the Slim 7. It's actually really good, guys. The chassis is mostly made out of aluminum and magnesium alloy, and it comes in this matte shadow black finish, which in my opinion doesn't look as good as the slate gray finish on the Slim 7i from last year. Another downside to this material is that it picks up a lot of fingerprints, and by a lot, I mean a lot. So from everyday handling, you're just gonna stare at this work of art by your nasty fingers, unless if you carry a microfiber cloth and a cleaning solution with you everywhere you go. That's just a pain in the butt. So yeah, when it comes to fingerprints, this is definitely, it's a 1 out of 10 rating. And what I mean by 1 out of 10, it's the resistance to fingerprints, so it's really bad. The extended section right by the hinge has this cool Aurora finish that looks pretty unique. They've done the same thing with the badges across the chassis. It really pops out when you're using this thing outdoors in specific lighting conditions. The hinge is really smooth and it's easier to open with one hand, but it does exhibit a lot of wobbling, and you can open it all the way up to 180 degrees flat, which is cool. As for size, it's actually a little bit bigger than the Zephyrus G15 due to that extension that I mentioned just earlier, but by not all that much. And the Z height is only 0.74 inches or 18.9 millimeters, which is really thin compared to its bigger brother, the Legion 7. This thing isn't that heavy as well. It only weighs around 4.2 pounds or roughly 2 kilos, which is about the same as the Zephyrus G15. So you shouldn't have any issues fitting the Slim 7 in your backpack. But the included power brick is really big. It's a 230 watt adapter, so you'll definitely need to make room for this gigantic thing in your bag. When you open the lid, you're greeted with a full-size keyboard with dedicated section for larger arrow keys. It's pretty much the same layout as other Legion laptops. Lenovo has integrated a few hotkeys within the function command. So if you hit function and Q, that actually cycles between the different performance modes on the laptop. Function plus R changes the refresh rate between 60 Hz and 165 Hz, which is pretty cool actually. And then function plus U turns off the connector LEDs that are located on the extension, and then Function Plus, the spacebar basically cycles between different RGB lighting effects. So these on-the-fly customizations are pretty nice. The power button also functions as a fingerprint reader, and I didn't have any issues logging in with that. Now, as for the keys, well, Lenovo's True Strike mechanism makes an appearance once again, and I really like what they've done here. It strikes that perfect balance between proper travel distance and smooth feedback when you bottom out. Now, this isn't going to be an exact replica of the ThinkPad series, but I think it's a good derivative of that, if that makes any sense. The RGB lighting on this laptop is actually really bright and vivid thanks to the collaboration with Corsair's iCUE system. You can actually fine-tune customization through the iCUE software and create different profiles. Although I do have to mention that Corsair's iCUE software has its own set of issues. For instance, if I set the LEDs to red and then put the laptop to sleep and then wake it up later, it's either going to be turned off or it's going to showcase another lighting effect, which is super inconsistent. I really hope they address this through a firmware update because sometimes it does get really annoying. The trackpad is all right. Even though Legion says that they're using a glass surface, weirdly it doesn't feel the same way as the Zephyrus G14 or even the Blade 14 because those laptops, they're super smooth and I absolutely love the trackpads. But this just feels, it's okay. It's also fairly big and easier to navigate with, and the primary left and right buttons have this weird metal cling sound. I'm just gonna give you guys a quick demonstration as to what I'm talking about, so just take a listen. This is the webcam test on the Slim 7i, and the quality looks pretty good, but sometimes the white balance does tend to shift around between the greens and the magentas, but luckily my skin isn't completely overexposed, so that's good. And the microphone sounds pretty good. You also get a really cool shutter right above the webcam, which allows you to just block that. So right now it's completely blocked, and then if I open it, boom, you can probably see me right now. So that's really nice. I'm pretty sure that's an awesome add-on for people who value privacy. The speakers sound average, but I expected that given its placement at the bottom. The trebles sometimes sound a little bit too harsh, and the bass response is very limited. So my advice would be to use a good pair of headphones. Port selection on the Slim 7 is a little different compared to the Legion 7 or even the 5 Pro. Because of how thin it is, they actually had to eliminate the RJ45 jack, HDMI port, and a few more USB ports. However, they have distributed them pretty well. So at the back, you get power in, a couple of USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports. On the right-hand side, there are a couple of USB Type C 3.2 Gen 2 ports with support for DisplayPort pass-through and power delivery up to 100 watts. Switching over to the left-hand side, you get an audio jack and a full-size SD card reader. Keep in mind that it only supports UHS 1, so if you have UHS 2 cards, then you won't be able to take advantage of its full speed or its high speed potential. Moving on to the display, Legion actually opted to go with a 16:9 aspect ratio at 1080p with a refresh rate of 165 Hz, and it maintains a respectable color gamut. As you can see, it covers 100% sRGB, 75% Adobe RGB, and 78% DCI-P3. So it's not as good as the Zephyrus G15 or even the G14. Not to mention, the brightness levels are not that great. It only peaks at around 333 nits. So this will do a pretty good job at gaming and other productive tasks, but I have seen better options with the competition. It also comes with G-Sync, which is an awesome feature for that tear-free, smooth gaming experience. But you have to make sure that you run the display directly off of the RTX 3060, and that can be done through NVIDIA's control panel. It would have been nice to see a 16:10 screen, but I've been saying that a lot lately, so I'm just going to leave it at that. You can also configure it with a 4K 60 Hz option that gets a lot brighter, and it covers 100% Adobe RGB, so that might be a really good option for content creators who value color accuracy. When you get under the hood, you have instant access to a single RAM slot, which is already populated on my sample. Keep in mind that 8 GB is on board, so the maximum supported memory is 24 GB. However, if you configure this laptop with 32 GB of RAM through Legion's website, you do get 16 GB on board, but that's going to be a lot of money. The primary NVMe SSD is right over here, and the performance is on par with the competition within this price range, and there is an extra M.2 slot for storage expansion. And now it's time to talk about battery life. And well, it's interesting to say the least. I mean, you have to remember that this thing has a 71 watt-hour battery. That's certainly not the biggest we've seen, But look, the slimness requires some sacrifices, but the results aren't all that bad at all, with about 9 hours, which beats the 5 Pro, but you also have to remember some of these laptops in these charts are using HS series CPUs as well. Heavy load is pretty much the same thing, but the playing field gets leveled a lot more, and most of the laptops end up getting really similar times, except that G15, which is just crazy in all battery tests. Keep in mind that we ran these tests with Optimus enabled, because if you switch over to the discrete GPU by itself, then the numbers are going to get a lot lower. Performance tuning on this laptop is done through 3 different settings that are pretty straightforward to get to. So you have quiet mode, and then there's balance mode and performance. Oddly, there is no extreme or fan boost modes that basically run the fans at full speed. But that's okay, because we don't run our tests on laptops in those settings anyways. There's also the option to turn on or off the integrated graphics via the MUX or hybrid mode switch. And you can also enable the overdrive option for the display. And of course, you can change, you can boost the network, lock the touchpad. All these settings are basically easy to access, and they're right at your fingertips. Now, we have to talk about those performance modes, because they make a huge difference in this case, because each one of them is really distinct. Performance mode runs the 5800H at a constant 68 watts, while balanced levels out to around 54 watts, but then there's a pretty big dip around the 7.5-minute mark to just 45 watts. I'm really not sure why it's doing this, but the temperature results might tell us something. As for quiet mode, well, it's only 20 watts, so the high-end CPU starts acting like one found in Ultrabooks. Now, I'll be honest here, the temperatures for performance and balance modes are some of the highest I've come across in a while. I mean, 100 degrees is just shy of AMD's maximum of 105 degrees, while even balance mode's 87 is getting up there too. I'm actually thinking this is why it cuts power back a bit further into the test. Either way, there's a price to pay for portability and weight, and this is it. But you can actually see what Legion is doing here. They're striving for top-end frequencies while running the 5800H at higher temperatures. There's no throttling going on at all, and that dip in balance mode seems due to design rather than there being a heat issue. And for quiet mode, well, just don't use that if you want to do anything other than web browsing. And that all leads to some interesting noise profiles that actually sound very different. Unlike some other laptops where all the modes sound about the same, quiet mode is basically quiet. In balance, the fans aren't that bad, but you can hear them, and of course there's performance, which is just extremely loud. I would recommend using headphones, but it's still quieter than running other gaming laptops at full speed. As for surface temperatures, they're actually really well managed, but I do have some small criticisms here. While the vents on the back do exhaust some of the heat, most of it is blasted to the sides, and that tends to warm up your mouse hand while gaming. The Slim 7's bottom doesn't have anything to worry about, but there is a pretty hot spot right at the center that gets pretty warm. Alright, so now that I've set the stage, let's actually move on to benchmarks. And what we're going to see is exactly what to be expected with a Ryzen 7 5800H operating around 65 watts. It's a pretty solid middle-of-the-pack performer when compared to other laptops here. But we also can't forget, this is the slimmest 15-inch laptop in these charts, and it's almost as thin as the Zephyrus G14. That should put some things into perspective, and it also explains why, in some situations, it can't compete with something like the Legion 5 Pro that might have similar specs, but it's also quite a bit thicker. As for video rendering and editing, the Slim 7 performs right where we would expect it in combined CPU and GPU loads, since its RTX 3060 isn't quite as fast as some of the other GPUs here. And speaking of the RTX 3060, let's see how Legion's actually treating it. Power levels are actually quite good in performance mode. It's not close to the 5 Pro's 170 watt RTX 3070 beast, but an average of 93 watts to 95 watts puts it pretty high versus some other laptops. Meanwhile, balance goes along at a pretty average 60 watts through the whole test, while quiet does the exact same thing as in our CPU testing. It really cuts things down big time. As for the RTX 3060's clock speeds, well, there's really nothing surprising going on here. There's no throttling or odd behavior, and that's good news for such a slim design where we sometimes see performance that's kind of all over the place. With that being said, the temperatures do get up there. It's not worrying territory in any way, but 85 degrees is the absolute maximum before the RTX 3000 series cards start cutting back boost power. The Slim 7 doesn't hit that, but it's damn close. Balanced and quiet modes are really well behaved though. Switching gears to gaming, and guys, I hate to say this again and sound like a broken record, but the Slim 7 performs exactly as you'd expect an RTX 3060 running at almost 100 watts. The frame rates are really competitive in every single game, and you have to remember some of these other laptops are either more expensive or thicker or a combination of both. But even a relatively high power limit can't overcome the RTX 3060's lower CUDA core count in some situations. That's just the way how it is with these laptops, and it happens all the time in the gaming laptop space. Luckily, more and more manufacturers like Legion are putting wattage specs in the models right alongside the other information, so make sure you pay close attention to that. So here are my final thoughts on the Legion Slim 7. There are actually a lot of good things to like about this laptop, and I'm going to start things off with just how thin it is. The design is very clean, the build quality is really good, the keyboard is excellent, the display is also really good. I mean, it gets a job done for gaming and all sorts of productive tasks. But that's where the highlights sort of end, because once you actually start using this thing, you're going to start to deal with a lot of fingerprints around the chassis, which takes away from the aesthetics of this device. The keyboard backlighting issue is a complete nightmare, especially with iCUE. When you turn this thing off and put it back on, it's either going to be rainbow puke or it won't turn on, which is super annoying, so I really hope they fix that. And there is the battery life, which is just, it's meh. It's not the best out there, especially compared to the G15, which costs about the same if you're looking at the 3060 model. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope I was able to give you all the information that you needed to know about the Legion Slim 7. Let us know what you guys think about this laptop. Is it something that impresses you? What do you guys think about the design, aside from the fact that it, attracts a lot of fingerprints? On that note, thank you so much for watching. I'm Ibor with hardwarecanucks, and I will talk to you guys in the next one. And definitely make sure, always, spend responsibly.